Welcome to the Regenaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Griggs. Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Griggs. I'm the host of the Regenaissance Podcast. Alongside me today is Hannah Gongola. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are.
Cool. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
So I guess to get started, there's a couple things I really wanted to talk about, because if a listener were to go to your page, they would definitely see a lot of cheese. And I mentioned it before starting this podcast that, I talk about dairy a lot. I'm wearing a hat that says Make Milk Raw Again and always talk about raw is law. Yet I have no idea what the process of cheese is like. So I think that could be actually a good starting point of just learning more about your backstory and what led you to the world of cheese making.
Yeah, so I'm still pretty new to cheese making. Having some successes here and there, but it takes a long time to figure out if the cheese is successful or not because of how long it takes to ripen and age. And so I just really started getting hot and heavy into it a couple months ago. So I was in Texas, and then I recently moved. But when I was in Texas, I had a herd share program. And so the majority of my milk was going to customers. And then any amount that I had left over, I was drinking or using in baking or making butter from cream. And so I didn't have enough to really get into cheese. But now I don't have a program, and I brought my dairy cow with me. And so I just went whole cow instead of whole hog into the cheese thing. And it's super interesting and I love it.
With the herd share, for example, because I haven't really talked a whole lot about that yet on the podcast. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so herd share is basically you're sharing your herd. And so the customer in states where raw milk is illegal, the way around it, and one of the legal avenues, is for a customer to purchase a portion of your herd or of your cow. And so they're paying for the animal's feed, for the boarding, for the maintenance, and then they just happen to get the byproduct of milk. And so no cash is exchanged for the milk. And so they're not buying the milk. They're paying for a portion of the cow or of the herd. And so that's really common amongst, small farmers, because they want to be able to, sell their milk or give out their milk. And it's a great program.
I was going to say, with that being in mind, then for folks that might be interested in getting a dairy cow and wanting to start something like that on their own, is this an avenue that you would recommend looking into?
Absolutely. It will be different from state to state. I know some are legalizing. Probably this year there'll be a number of states that'll legalize it, which is fantastic. And so that might not be a necessity, but it's really nice for the farmer because you have a buy-in price. So they have to put down a deposit. So if you're doing glass jars, which I did, and I think that's a really common thing that people do, the buy-in is really helpful because then you have that money up front, and then it's just a monthly subscription for them. And so it can help, the farmer pay for the cow itself. But yeah, I totally recommend it. Definitely read up on it. Definitely make sure you have the space to stay sanitary and milk properly and all that. But yeah, I love doing it. It's great.
How much land would you need just for one dairy cow then?
I like to say like 2 acres per head. And you'll probably still have to supplement with hay regardless of where you are. But I think one cow should have 2 acres.
And then I guess going back, what got you into this whole, did you grow up on a farm or?
No.
So what's the backstory leading up to that then?
So I am back in West Virginia currently. And so I was born and raised here. And I knew since I was really young, I want to say like middle school, I was like, I want to do food. Like I didn't really know what that looked like, but I just knew I wanted to do something with food. And so I went to school for nutrition. So I have a Bachelor of Science in Nutrition. And about halfway through, I kind of realized like I hate anything clinical. And I was like, that's not food though. And so all of my peers were going the, dietetic route. And so I applied for an internship on the organic farm at my school. And they came back to me and they're like, this is for ag students, right? And I was like, can I not do it? And they're like, no, you can. We just want to make sure that that's for ag students. We've never had someone outside of the ag program apply for it. And so it was only a 3-month program. But that was like dipping my toe into it, and I loved it. And then I graduated, and my first gig in Austin was I was the garden intern at the Central Texas Food Bank. And so if you've ever been, you know that the gardens are beautiful. So I was doing all of that maintenance work. And so I had 3 months experience in West Virginia. I had 3 months experience in Texas. And then I had the idea to start my own gardening company in Texas with 6 months of experience doing any kind of, ag stuff. And then I started. And so I bought the farm. That was kind of like my home base where I was planning to set up a greenhouse and, teach myself how to build gardens for other people so I could install them. And long story short, I didn't end up enjoying it, but while I was not building gardens for customers, I started acquiring animals and doing my own gardens. And I really loved the animal husbandry aspect of it because, of course, I needed chickens, and then I needed cows, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And so it was a really nice transition into farming. It was slow but fast, if you will.
Yeah.
And so that it just kind of happened. And now it's all I want to do ever.
I definitely relate to that. Because every time I always go back to this for me personally. So I worked on this rural farm in Pennsylvania. I mean, the surrounding town was like 2,000 population. This was fall of 2022. And I have thought about that farm every single day since I've left. 'Cause I don't know, for me, this is why I always try to get folks to take their family out to a farm just to go out and see it for themselves. Obviously, the farmer and rancher has to allow visitors. Don't just stroll up to some random place and say hello. But there's just so much to be said about being out there in the land, but then also all you hear is just the nature. And yeah, I can't wait to have my ranch someday too, just because that's the only time for all the stuff I've been through with my family that it's the true, I guess, at peace feeling. But going back to the whole garden conversation, because I've thought about this a lot, with the fact that most people today buy everything from the grocery store. I mean, for me, it wasn't until I was 27 to where I didn't buy something from a grocery store. With the uptick of HOAs to where it doesn't allow you to do really anything, especially have something as simple as a small plot of garden or a couple chickens. But then also it made me think about World War II with the whole Victory Garden movement, to where 40% of all of our produce was grown from these small beds of gardens that they called Victory Gardens. And how I feel like that could be a great way to get folks, especially in the urban environments, to start growing their own food. Because another thing for me is just we're so disconnected from our food. Whenever you can actually see the whole process of it all, I really just think that can change folks not overnight, because you have to wait for it to grow. But actually that's even that too, because things go wrong through the whole process of gardening, and it's so frustrating. And then you have to redo the whole process. I think
Patience. Absolutely. Yeah, I would say I'm still impatient. I am an impatient person. It's, I want things and I want it done and I want to do it. And anyway, but there's a certain level of patience that I have acquired. And I understand that this thing will take time. And I don't know. It teaches you so much. I mean, more than just patience, of course, but, yeah, it's a beautiful process. I mean, animals and plants, and then they work in, synchronicity with each other. The whole thing is just beautiful.
Well, I guess with the cheese making too, because that I would assume requires a lot of patience, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Well, I guess can you go through the whole process? Because I really actually don't know that.
We can totally pivot. Yeah. So people are like, how does milk become this thing? And so kind of the general outline to make cheese is, so you have specific cultures for specific cheeses. And so certain cheeses require certain cultures. Some, make the stinky cheeses, and some make the bloomy rind cheeses, which are the ones that have like a beautiful white coat on the outside. And so you take your milk, whether it's pasteurized or non-pasteurized, and you heat it to a certain temperature. Again, different cheeses require certain temperatures, and then the cultures are activated based on certain temperatures and other, living bacteria that are still alive in the milk. And then you add your cultures and you let it ripen, and then you coagulate it with rennet. And then you have your cheese curds. And then, some places, this is not one of those places, just eat cheese curds. And so that's a thing that people do. I don't just eat cheese curds. I take it to the next step. And then at that point, you can go in any different direction. You either cook them for certain cheeses, you'll cook them and stir them and dry them out. Or for other ones, you'll put them directly in your cheese molds, which are different cylindrical sizes, basically. Some of them are full spheres. Some of them are loaves. Some of them are tiny little cups. Just, again, depends on the cheese that you're making. And you either press it or you don't press it. And then after it's done, whatever cheese it is that you're doing, you put it in I'm pointing to my cheese fridge that's behind me. And then it has to age for whatever amount of time that cheese has to age at a certain humidity and temperature. And then you take it out and hope that it's good and what you tried to make. It's hard to explain all cheeses at once, but I feel like that's kind of the general outline. Add your cultures, make your curds, do whatever it is with those curds, and then eventually put it in to age/ripen.
Do you have a story of where it went wrong?
I most of my stories are cheeses that have gone wrong at this. I'm finally starting to get decent cheeses, so I figured out the Bloomy Ryans, which are bries, camemberts, and like triple cremes. I actually just made my first camemberts yesterday, so they'll go in the fridge in like 2 days or something. But my first brie and triple creme have finally tasted like they're supposed to and been texturally what they're supposed to. So far, I'm still working on blue cheese. If you've seen those videos on my Instagram, they have not turned out right so far. They've all tasted like Swiss, which, you follow exactly what you're supposed to do. But if one tiny thing goes wrong, if it's, a couple degrees above or below, if you didn't wash your hands like one time and you introduced one little thing, I don't know. So it's really, so many things could go wrong and you're never really sure how to pinpoint what it was. And the only way to do it is by making it over and over until one finally turns out right and hope you can replicate it. So taking notes is very important.
Do you only do just raw dairy, or because I'm also curious with the differences between the whole cheese making process for raw versus pasteurized?
I only use milk from my cow, but you can use pasteurized. So you'll add calcium chloride into your cheese, into your milk, typically right before the cultures are added. And it adds back, I believe, calcium that was lost in the pasteurization process. I haven't read too much about it because I don't have to do it. And I do have calcium chloride, but I'm not sure. But I know you can do it. And a lot of recipes will say, if using pasteurized milk, add X amount of calcium chloride. So I go to cheesemaking.com for all of you guys who want to check that out. It's New England cheese company. They're fantastic. They have everything you need on the site.
And I'm curious then too, having your own dairy cow, has that changed your relationship with dairy as a whole? Because this is another thing that, dairy is just very polarizing. I read all the comments from my Instagram page, and it's truly wild to see how on one side or the other it is with this. But I also feel like it's also, again, going back to just being so disconnected from this whole world. So I'm curious, since getting your own dairy cow, what's that just relationship been like having one? Because I feel like that's a huge, giant leap from going from having, say, like a dog to a dairy cow.
Yeah, I've had cows for several years now. Majority of them were beef. I did have a couple dairy cows. I call them off-brand jerseys because in the beginning days of my farming, I didn't know that you had to get, you know, a proper dairy cow for it to do what it was supposed to completely. So I had very, very low producing off-brand Jersey cows. And so I was milking them, but it wasn't as much as this, full purebred Jersey that I have now. I mean, I'm fortunate. I've never had any issues with dairy, consuming it. And so I never really had that. And I never thought about raw dairy until I became a farmer, of course, because I don't know. I feel like the movement's also been in the last 5 years. And so to me, because I I do the farming and the milking and the cheese making, I don't know why you would do it any other way. I don't know how getting something from a jug in the store, something that you have no idea where it came from, you have no idea who touched it, what went into it, what the animal was, how it was treated, what kind of medication it received. You don't know how old it was. You don't know anything about it. I don't see how getting a jug of white liquid from the store is somehow better than the way that I get my milk. I don't understand. I think that people being unrealistically scared of raw dairy. It doesn't make sense now. It made sense years ago, and so I don't know if you know the history about raw milk. Do you know? Okay.
Yeah.
So of course you do. Duh. The Industrial Revolution, because everyone flocked to the cities, they brought the cows inside. First of all, don't. And so they would keep these animals confined in basements with no windows, and they would just be forced to, produce their milk in these tiny, disgusting basements in their own feces and other, rats and bugs and everything. And the milk they produced didn't smell like milk. It didn't taste like milk. And so that's when they started adding bleaches and all kinds of other chemicals to the milk so that it somehow still resembled milk. And then mothers would feed those to their babies. And so infant mortality rates were up 40% during the Industrial Revolution. And so, of course, that scared so many people. And so people were against, raw milk. And I don't blame them, but we're not in the Industrial Revolution. It's 2025. You should not be scared of something that is produced from an animal, especially when you can see that animal. If you can go pet it, you can ask the farmer all the questions. You should not be scared. It
really does. And this is actually why I'm transitioning my whole brand to strictly media, because I'm realizing how much awareness, education, but then just keep having to reiterate the same points to really help drive the fact how ridiculous something like raw milk is. Because like what you're saying with the whole phrase of it's not the cow, but the how, this is such a great example of that, because there's also literally pictures of at that time where they had harnesses keep the cows up because they could not stand on their hind legs because they're so sick, and they'd still milk them. Yeah. So of course that's going to make you sick whenever you sell that stuff. But then also, like you say, on the good point of the fact that we're in modern technology, think about, for example, AI, how fast it's advanced in the 3 years it's existed. So we have something like that, but yet all of a sudden we don't have the technology for the sanitation and all that for raw dairy. It's hilarious, but it's also kind of a joke how
it's a joke. If you're going to be scared of something, be scared of AI. Don't be scared of milk that comes from a cow. Get your priorities straight.
Yeah. Well, that's another, just media as a whole has just been so co-opted with the other government agencies to instill fear. And that's why, again, I always go, if you are so, how do I can phrase this? If you're so nervous and scared by what the media is telling you, go out and actually visit a farmer and rancher. That's the whole point I try to get at is.
They're not going to BS you, man.
No. but not, you can also just see everything for yourselves. Like if you go to say Mark McAfee's raw farm, for example, you'll be able to see everyone that's there to do all the testing and cleaning and sanitation, but then also the facilities that he has and the quality and care of the cows. You can see all that for yourself. And it's just,
even people who don't know anything about animals, you know a happy animal when you see one. You know a healthy animal, you know a happy animal, you know what they look like. You can do the same with dogs and cats and any animal.
yeah.
So even if you don't know anything about cows, you can go to that farm, look at that animal, and know that it's well taken care of. And then you can ask, if you're concerned, what medications does this cow receive? That's pretty much it. That's if you want to take it a step further, you can be like, do these cows get grain when they're being milked in the salon? Where does the grain come from? If you've done your homework and you know what questions to ask, and chances are 99% that the farmer's going to answer, and they're going to be happy to answer, and they're going to be thrilled that you asked that question, that you care. So yeah, educate yourself.
Well, it's also funny. Yeah, well, too, because it made me think about, I don't know if you ever saw this video service on social media it was a bunch of dairy cows inside of a barn, and it was just like an automated, it seemed like grass feeder.
With the grass?
Yeah, but everyone was saying that those were beef cows, but that's just how ignorant a lot of, like, the general population is. But then they'll see that, and kind of, this is my issue with social media. It's very hard to stop misinformation like that, because that got shared like crazy everywhere, to where it made it seem like that these cows had this horrific living environment, and they were pretty much CAFO, but they were just dairy cows simply being fed before they get milk.
Yeah, if they're getting fresh grass while they're being milked, like they have to stand in the salon for 10 minutes. I don't know how fast the milk machines are. 15 minutes, and they're getting fresh grass. That's awesome. And then they're going back out to graze and forage. Yeah.
I mean, that just goes to the whole topic of how much education is needed. I guess with everything you do on Instagram too, I guess, do you have any goals in mind in terms of everything that you're doing?
Not really. I just like to share what I'm doing. I'm excited about what I do, and I just want to share it. I'm proud of it. Yeah, I don't really have any goals except to share it. I love connecting with new people. I use Instagram as a tool. That's mainly, I share, of course, but I also get inspiration from other, food creators, from other people in ag. And so I staying connected, meeting, new folks like you, and just sharing what I'm doing. Those are really my goals.
Have you noticed, because I'm also curious too, since you first started, whatever you said, you had your 3 months and then came to Austin with the 3 months, just the whole culture of agriculture, but then our food. What are some, I guess, good and bad things that you've noticed since that time?
Well, the reason that I got turned off from doing gardens for other people is people don't want to do work for themselves. And so that's kind of what turned me on to just farming on my own farm. Like, people can just buy the finished product from me because they don't want to do the work themselves. I would install a huge garden bed with irrigation, with the plants, with a care guide, and still people wouldn't take care of them. And that's it. It was so disheartening. But then I found the love in just doing it all myself and selling the finished product, because I know I'll be able to do it. And so, yeah, I guess that was it. And also people just not knowing. And so, they'd come out to the farm and I could show them, and they'd never pet a cow before. So I guess this is, that's a positive, from it, but yeah, not just not knowing, not educating themselves, I guess. I got a couple biohackers who would, message me sometimes and be like, "Oh, do you have this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have some of that." And then they would just never follow up with that. I don't know, just different kinds of people, just looking for certain things that it wouldn't be a lifestyle. It was like, "Oh, this is a fad. I want to try it out. Let me eat this raw beef testicle." And what do you think, you're going to gain immortality because you eat a raw beef testicle one time? Why don't you figure out how to incorporate organ meats into your daily life rather than...
It was just a good pre-workout, but yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I would get stuff like that all the time. All the time.
That's why I asked too, is just the whole culture is all over the place, but I'm trying to just gain a better understanding, because what you're saying, how they don't want to do the work, is what I expected. Because again, going back to, agriculture is very sensationalized online, especially with the show Yellowstone that came out.
I won't watch.
What's that?
I won't watch it.
But that, I've never seen it either, but it was just, I remember hearing, I mean, I still hear about it all the time from that. But with just social media too, it's just so sensationalized of the actual everyday life of farming and ranching.
Something I just thought, and I get this regularly. I've gotten this phrase since I started. I get it all the time. You are living my dream. Those words, it's first of all, I'm not. Like, I can guarantee you, like, it might look idyllic and beautiful, and it's beautiful, but you don't understand. Also, if it's your dream, then do it. Like, and so that phrase, and it's the same phrase repeated all the time from all different people, like people I don't know, all the time. And I don't know, it's that phrase that they don't know, they don't understand. Like, it's hard. And then I guess going back to not wanting to do it yourself is like, you know, so I don't know.
Does it feel insulting whenever you hear that from others?
I've gotten so used to it. No, it's just kind of just another thing. It's just another thing because they don't know. They don't know, and they won't actually ask. And I don't think they know how to phrase things. But I mean, putting it on paper, like, oh, she lives on a farm. She tends her animals. You know, she makes her food. Like, on paper, that sounds, yeah, that sounds great. Who wouldn't want to do that? But that's not actually, I mean, yeah, that's what it is, but that's not it. Like, I struggle, like, in every sense of the word. I have struggled and I'll continue to struggle because unfortunately this is my calling. I am called to struggle to create food. And yeah, it's just, and I don't obviously share the hard things. I don't want to talk about all these animals that died and that I had to watch suffer, or that I had to put down, or this project that I spent a bunch of money on that didn't work at all. Like, I don't want to talk about the terrible things. Like, I want to share the good things. But, and so to say I'm living your dream is, it's not insulting. It's just, it's not real. People on social media saying you're living a certain life and they don't actually know. You're living something beautiful when it's actually not, behind the scenes, farming, hard work.
What is, through your experiences so far, what has been one of your most, I guess, favorite stories or aspects of your experience so far?
I guess there are so many. I guess one of the biggest, like, pivot moments for me, and it's a great story, but it's kind of sad. I mean, for people who can't totally grasp it. I mean, I guess your listeners can more or less pretty much grasp it. But anyway, so one of the first cows that I bought was from a fellow farmer, and he was pretty young. He was a Jersey bull, and he was like, I think 5 months, so he was like freshly weaned. And through a turn of events, he ended up getting out from a hole in the fence, and he got hit by a car. And I was so torn up. It was when I was still going to markets and selling starts. So I was going to Barton Creek Farmers Market. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I almost said Barton Springs. That's not right. And so I was so torn up. I was like bawling in my truck at this farmer's market. It was just, I was so torn up about this cow. And then I called my friends and I was like, can you send your husband to help me? Like, I got to get him off the side of the road. And it was winter. And so it hadn't gotten above 40 degrees. And he'd only been there for maybe 10 hours, like maybe, if that. And so we pulled over to the side of the road, put my tailgate down, and we couldn't lift him. He was small, but we couldn't get him in. And then this guy pulled over. He was like, "You guys need a hand?" I was like, "Yeah, that'd be great." And then another guy pulled over, and he was clearly coming back from deer camp, which was really funny. And he was like, "Do you guys need a hand?" And we were like, "Yeah." And so they ended up just doing it, and I was just in the bed of the truck, like not doing anything. So we got this cow in the bed of my truck and took him back to my house. And I was like, "Do you think we could butcher him?" And so at this time, I was like a year in, and I hadn't processed any animals yet. I hadn't even considered it. I was still in the beginning stages of figuring out what I was doing. And I was like, I hate for this to all go to waste. I was like, maybe I should call this other farmer friend. She's got knives and she's, done stuff like this. And so I called her, and it was getting dark at this point and it was raining. And so I turned on the lights of my truck and we broke down this animal enough that we could. And we split it into thirds. And I just remember looking and because it was the first, because I didn't hunt growing up. It was the first animal I'd ever seen broken down. And I was up really late and I burned all the innards because it was raining and anyway, all kinds of stuff. And then the next morning I woke up and I was different. I wasn't sad. And I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to raise animals. And it's not sad to feed myself and feed people with this. And so that was the pivotal moment of, yeah, I can raise animals and eat them. And it's not sad. I mean, of course, if you're particularly attached to an animal, it can be a little sad. But I fed 2 families, their freezers were full and my freezer was full. And so anyway, it was a tragedy turned very educational and eye-opening. And so from then on, I started raising animals for meat and processing them properly, not roadkill. But anyway, so that meat was delicious. It was great, and I learned so much, and then I got into butchery and did it better.
No, I agree. That's actually because I was vegan for 2.5 years, and then
Yikes. We won't even talk about it. I'll give you a pass.
but then I went from being vegan to a year later. I was in Colorado on this ranch helping butcher chickens, and it was kind of a similar experience because there is a lot of the good and bad thing about the farm. It's a lot of life and death, and it is like you were saying, it is quite sad, especially if it's like a baby lamb or something like that. But whenever I was helping with those chickens and seeing how the farmer actually cared for them, unlike what a lot of vegans were saying that he did not abuse them, he actually, at the end of their life, had this really beautiful ceremony to give them their respects. And then I was able to take one of those birds with me and then grilled it out with my friends. And I remember seeing their reaction to this farm fresh bird compared to anything we bought in a grocery store. And just that whole entire experience really changed everything for me too, of the actual connection piece. Because again, the food tasted incredible. Unlike all the ultra processed food, this stuff actually nourishes your body. And so that's also why I try to push people to go. That's the cool thing with, speaking of just being in the surrounding Austin areas, Force of Nature, the huge bison meat company, they do bison harvests to where you can go out there and just see the whole experience, to where then they eventually end up harvesting a bison, and then I think you can try their raw heart, which is just the whole cool aspect of everything. Because again, we've been so disconnected from our food, and we just go to a grocery store, expect everything to be fully stocked, but then don't actually see what goes behind the scenes to get to that point. So yeah.
When talking about chickens, my favorite class to teach is the chicken butchery class, for so many reasons. But I had several vegans who came to the class and they processed birds, like active vegans,
Really?
and past vegans. And There's something about that. I mean, it's they trust me, my farm, and the way I raise my animals. I mean, not that I support veganism in any way, but they trust me as kind of a lifestyle shift, and that's really really cool. Especially because you're processing this animal, and so you're going to take care while you're doing it, and you're going to use every part of that animal. At least I hope everybody did, and I had this little bonus portion afterwards, and I would show how to utilize all the organs afterwards. And so, I made pate, and then I was like, if you want to take some home, you can take some home. This is how you do it in the end. You should definitely make stock from the bones. If you want to take feet, you can take feet. And so there was a team building aspect to it, because people who didn't want to kill an animal would lean on other people who had already done it. And it's a really special thing, from something that seems so scary and nerve-wracking and you don't want to do it, to at the end people are like, sticking their whole hand in the chicken's cavity and cleaning it and talking about stuff around the table. And it's my favorite class to teach, and it's something so beautiful. From someone who's never, processed any kind of animal ever.
I can really relate to that, because whenever I worked on the farm, we would butcher that all on site too, with the chickens and rabbits. And that's interesting with active vegans, because this is one thing. They are very outspoken, loud people. But with that being said, the one interesting thing to note that I always come back to this, especially being an ex-vegan, is the fact that I've yet to meet or hear or read anything online about someone that was vegan, that went back to eating meat, regretted that decision, then went back to being vegan again. That in itself is very, very telling. And then kind of like what you're describing, I bet that changed the lives of those vegans, because they actually got to see the process from start to finish of seeing the end of its life. But then I'm curious if they ended up trying any meat after that, because it really does just change your whole perception, but then just actually gain the respect that the animals deserve.
Yeah. I received some feedback. I'm not sure about the vegans necessarily, but I definitely got feedback that the class was great and really empowering and educational. And I'm not sure if vegans ate the chickens, but I hope so. I hope their whole lives were changed from eating that chicken. I've had people message me saying, I've been vegan for the past, X amount of years. And then this one in particular was, I was in a long-term relationship and my libido was so low. And I thought, it's because we were in a long-term relationship and it just, things dwindle. And then one day I had some fried chicken, and all of a sudden my libido, I was ready to go. And I thought it was a long-term relationship, but it wasn't. I just needed meat in my diet. So just so you know, you're doing God's work. It's like, wow. That was I'll never forget that. Thanks for sharing, bud.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I didn't make the fried chicken.
Yeah.
Wasn't my chicken, but you're welcome.
The last thing, because actually now I finally remembered, going back to with the whole sensationalized viewpoint of everything too. Also, I'm noticed this a lot, especially the last 6 months, but also especially with the huge Maha movement, which is great, is now folks kind of, it's not like an attacking way, but it does come across that. So for example, I saw Steak and Shake, how they're going fully tallow, which is great. And then they're mentioning they're not using any preservatives or anything, because I know like B-dubs, for example, they have tallow, but their tallow has other ingredients in that. And I remember reading a comment on under Steak and Shake's Twitter about pretty much making all these demands, like they need to be transparent, making sure it's grass-fed and finished tallow and 100% this and that. And it's great that the folks are aware of all these things, but now they're making these crazy demands without realizing what our food system's like, and the fact that our cattle inventory is pretty much the lowest since the late 40s. If you want grass-fed and finished tallow, well, then you add on 2 extra years to add on the cows. So I can give, that's just one of so many examples I can give on our food system that folks, yes, it's great that you want to make these or have these questions, but you really have to be aware of what's at play here, but then also really understanding the life of the farmer and rancher, because you're making all these demands, but they have these huge trade-offs. They're in stressful environments. They're already probably in massive amounts of debt. Suicide rates for farmers is higher than veterans. Again, I can go on and on about that stuff too, and that's why I'm so focused on education and awareness. Is the fact that everything's happening so fast, and it feels like the farmers and ranchers still are kind of left out, even though they're being propped up and more people are being aware of it. It's still kind of, that's the one thing I'm nervous about moving forward is, are they still going to be left out of the picture fully?
You want mine? Okay. So there are a lot of old farmers. I think the statistic is like 65% of all farmers are, I want to say like 65 and older. Maybe I'm getting the 65 mixed up. Either way, majority of farmers are old.
Yeah.
Like retirement age. And they're all stuck in these subsidy cycles. And so I have hope for the next generation of farmers, me being one of them, that, well, let me kind of shift a little bit. My dad asked me how, small farms could fix the food system, because, seeing what I've done as a small farmer, I can't do that much. I can only do so much as a small farmer. And he was like, I think industrial farming has a place. And I agree that industrial farming has a place. You can't feed all of America with small farms at this point. And I agree with that. However, I think if large industrial farms could follow and implement better management practices, that we could do better if they, switch up the, the soybeans that they're growing. And if they take care of the soil, if we focus on the soil and the health of the animals, I think that the industrial farms could improve. However, I also think that small farms should supplement the things that the industrial farms cannot produce. I think that maybe we divide the industrial farms up a little bit and then fix sections of them, improve the soil. The small farmers could buy them and farm them. I think it's going to be a marriage of small farms and industrial farms working together rather than, industrial farms producing one monocrop and that's it forever. And so I think I don't know how that looks. I don't really do numbers. But I think if we could figure out a system where we could work together, I think all the farmers could win. And then it's focused more on the farmer and how they're running their individual farm versus, the demands of the farm and the farmer and other companies, the tallow, for example. I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer, but I think that could help. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think moving forward with the future of farming, I don't think we can get rid of the large industrial farms. I think we can just improve what already exists and supplement with small.
No, I definitely agree with that. I'm curious, and then just like on social media, or I guess just in general, do any of the younger generations talk to you at all, especially with any interest or questions or anything?
I mean, yeah, when I'm still working on finding that community currently, with this move back here, but in Texas, there was a whole community of younger farmers, doing their thing. And there was even, young people who didn't necessarily own a farm, or own the land themselves, but they practiced on somebody else's farm, or they were just about spreading the word and the knowledge on, rotational grazing, high, intensity management. And so, yeah, I don't know if they necessarily asked me questions, but just knowing them in the community, it was nice to be able to have conversations.
I guess my last question then would be, do you have any advice or recommendations for younger generations if they might have just inkling of interest of whether it be, I guess, just any inklage of interest in just agriculture as a whole?
In doing it themselves?
Yeah.
Or I think if you know it's going to be hard and you can't prepare yourself. But if you want to do it, figure out how to do it. It's worth it. It's a different way of life. But if you think you could love it, then do it. Because like me, I don't want to do anything else.
Why is it worth it for you?
I I love the whole process, which is also my downfall because I love the whole process. So you know, I want to breed the cows and, have the babies and then grow them to milk them or, process them for beef and then make that into a meal. And I want to start the things from seed and grow them and harvest them and then make that into a meal. I love the whole, it doesn't exist. And then it does exist on a plate in front of you. Like my mind and my will to do it is now going to nourish my body or nourish somebody else's body. Like I willed it into existence and now I exist because of it. I don't know. It's also my downfall because I want to do everything. I want to do all the gardening, all the animal husbandry, the bees, the flowers. I mean, you name it, I want to do it. So I'm in love with the process of it, the whole thing, and that's what it is for me. It might be another reason for somebody else. I don't know, but the highs are really high and the lows are really low. Yeah.
Well, it just sounds, that's also why I just push people to even go out and visit, because you're obviously going to be making trade-offs regardless of your decisions. But I know there's a lot of people out there to where doing any type of food production for themselves, their local community, would add the fulfillment aspect that they're, I guess, deep down yearning for, especially in urban environments. Because that's why I focus on the awareness side too, is there people just aren't aware of the fact that this could really be the thing that they might make the transition for. And like you said, it's hard as hell, and you are making a lot of different sacrifices, but it's way more fulfilling than what you're doing, but also it's way more fulfilling than you could have ever imagined. And that's that's why I love this podcast, is hearing these stories. I hear it a lot because I experienced it myself on the farm. It is a lot of work, and I remember I was originally going to go to a local jazz bar on a Saturday night, and instead I'm on the farm by myself trying to corral the cows that got out. But
the cows getting out, that's for anyone who wants to do ag. That's a common one.
Yeah, I mean,
the cows got out.
It turned out
if you don't want to do something, I can't. The cows got out.
That's actually a very valid point, because it happened a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just, go in knowing that you're going to be really poor and you're not going to be able to do what you did before. Poor and, yeah, not really socialized like you did. And if you can do those two things, you're good.
But I still think long term that could both trend up. That's my hope.
I mean, I like that lifestyle. You have to prefer that lifestyle to, the today's kind of typical, brunch and yoga on a Saturday morning. Like you don't have Saturday mornings. Like you might go to a market, that might be your Saturday morning, but you still gotta tend everything. You still have chores. You have chores every day. It doesn't matter if it's a holiday. But if you can like that lifestyle, farming's for you.
I agree. Well, thank you, Hannah. I guess with that being said, if there's any last things you would like to share or plug, that would be a good time.
That's pretty much it. If you have any kind of itch to get into ag, do it. You'll learn. I can't even explain the amount of things you'll learn about yourself, about the world around you. Yeah. If you have any kind of itch, just do it in any capacity that you can.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.